Hi, today I wanted to talk about king and pawn versus king and pawn endgames. And I wanted to talk about some concepts such as outflanking and the trebuchet. So, in this position, it's white to play and win. You can pause the video here if you want to try to solve it. So, in situations where the pawn is placed against another pawn, where neither of them can move, like a traffic jam, the winning method is to move the king to a critical square. So, critical squares can be three spaces to the side of the pawn, so there can be up to 6 critical squares if the pawn is in the middle of the board. Here, if white can move to any of these squares, they can win the pawn. So what's going to happen is white's going to get opposition, and then they're going to get zugzwang. So zugzwang is when the side that moves loses because they have to give up territory or lose a key square. So after king e5, king to d7, and white moves to e6, which is a critical square. So after king to b7, king a7 is the only way to defend the pawn. And now this is zugzwang. In positions like this, if it's a b through g pawn, then it does not matter whose move it is. Even if the defending side has opposition, it's still a win for the side with the pawn. The exception is rook pawns and anything that's not on the 5th rank. So if this position was on the 4th rank with the pawn 1 square behind and the king's also 1 square downward, then that would be a draw because black has opposition. And that's game. So this position is white to move and win. So pause the video here if you want to try to solve it. The theme of the first puzzle was outflanking, and that's when you approach from the side, from the flank. So the theme of this puzzle is trebuchet, which I'll explain here. First, we should look at the move king to d6. And this move actually loses the pawn because now this is zugzwang. And there's no way to keep the defense of the e5 pawn. So instead of king to d6, the winning move is king to d7. And now if king to f5, and the king must step away from the pawn. So this position represents a trebuchet. And let's look at what a trebuchet is. A trebuchet is a machine used in medieval warfare for hurling large stones. So you notice that one side will be holding onto all of the weight, and that's how it creates the momentum. And similarly, you have a situation here where one side is going to be unable to hold on to the pawn. It's game over. Okay, so the theme of this puzzle is called Outflanking Trebuchet. So it's going to use both of the ideas we talked about in the previous puzzles. In this position, it's white to move and win, and so pause the video here if you want to try to solve it. If we look at the critical squares for the e6 pawn, it's these three right here. And if we look at the critical squares for the e5 pawn, it's going to be these three right here. So even though black is closer, they're actually going to be slower. Even though black's king is one file away from the pawns, they're actually slower to get to the critical squares. So white wins. So now first we can look at this line, king to g6. Now if they played king to f5 here, this would be zugzwang. Another term for this type of situation is called 9 squares, so you want to be the second one to approach the square to win the pawn. And this is a repeat of the previous puzzle. Okay, so the other line after king to b7 is king to e7. And now king to c7. And white has reached a critical square. Okay, so the theme of this puzzle is called defensive pitch, and it's white to play and draw. You can pause the video here if you want to try to solve it. So the best move for white is to play pawn to f4. And now this is a draw. So here there's no way that black can capture the pawn and keep opposition. If it were black's turn, they could play pawn to f4, and then it would not matter who has opposition when they capture the f3 pawn, because also they would move to a critical square first after pawn to f4. They'd play then king to d3 or e3. So here, if white played king f2, this would be losing now because black gains opposition here. So king g2 and king f2 gains opposition. And this is a draw. So the rule is if the pawn approaches the second to last rank with check, then it leads to a stalemate. Chess Kings aims to provide quality chess programs for people of all ages. If you'd like this video and want to see more, consider donating to Chess Kings by going to our website and clicking the donate button. Buy my book, The Real Beginner's Guide to Chess, available on Amazon for $14.99. And remember to like and subscribe. And white has reached a critical square.